Now that we've looked at supply curves, what they look like, and the idea that changes in price will cause us to move along those supply curves, increase in price causing an increase in quantity supplied, or decrease in price causing a decrease in quantity supplied, we're going to look at other factors that might change that cause the supply curve to shift. So changes in any other factors that are important to sellers besides the price, those are the things that cause supply curves to shift. So recall that profit can be written as the quantity times the difference between price and average cost, or quantity times the profit per unit. So suppose that the price stays the same, but our average costs go down. So now we're going to see that we have bigger profits per unit even if the price hasn't changed. So with higher profits per unit, we're going to see an increase in quantity supplied even if the price remains constant. So a higher quantity supplied at each price, or a supply curve that's going to be moving to the right. But if the average costs go down, if the average costs go up, these profits per unit are going to get smaller. And so if something changes that causes the average cost to go up, we have a decrease in these profits per unit. And in response to that, firms decrease their quantity supplied because they're getting less benefit per unit, even if the price hasn't changed. So at any given price, we now have a lower quantity supplied, or we're going to see a supply curve shifting to the left. So when we look at an increase in supply using the horizontal read, at any given price, we're going to see a higher quantity supplied than before. So all the points in our supply curve are moving to the right, and we have a supply curve that's shifted to the right. We would say that supply now has increased. Or similarly, we have an increase in supply. Sellers are willing to sell more of the product than they were before. But if the quantity started here, and at that quantity, this is the price that sellers would need to receive to be willing to offer that quantity for sale, now they might be willing to offer the same quantity even if the price were to be lower than before. And so for each of these different quantities, there's a lower price where firms would still be willing to offer that quantity for sale. And so here again, the entire supply curve is to the right of the original one. So here we have to be careful because this is an increase in supply, but using the vertical read, it looks like we're going down. Down and increase don't seem to fit together. And so, to be clear, whenever we talk about an increase in supply, we're talking about a rightward shift in the supply curve. Supply curves move to the right when they increase, they do not move down. The up and down can be confusing in terms of interpretation. And the technical reason for that is if I were a mathematician, I would have put the price, the independent variable on the x-axis, and the quantity, the dependent variable on the y-axis. So people that really like their math classes, this is going to hurt your head for a while, and I apologize for that. The reason that economists do it backwards is because Alfred Marshall did it wrong a couple hundred years ago, and we've continued to follow his mistake by convention. So with a decrease in supply, the horizontal read is the one that makes perhaps the most sense here. If we have a decrease in supply, we're saying that at this price, quantity supplied is lower than it was before. Firms aren't willing to sell as much at any given price, and the supply curve decreases or shifts to the left. With the vertical read, if we started with this price and quantity, firms aren't as willing to sell as much as they were before. So in order for firms to still be willing to sell the same quantity, they'd have to receive a higher price to be willing to do that. And so the price required for any given quantity is higher than before, and we're going to get a new supply curve that is a decrease in supply. Or again, the horizontal read is always easier for interpretation. We have a leftward shift or a decrease in supply. So supply shift factors, basically anything that causes the cost per unit to change, or the average cost to change. So for example, if we have a change in the price of the inputs, if our input prices go down, we have lower cost per unit and we have higher profits per unit, and so we would have an increase in supply or a shift to the right. if we have higher input prices, then our profits per unit are going to get smaller, and firms respond by offering less quantity supplied for sale at any price, so we have a decrease in supply that results. So this could be things like, changes in the wages that we're paying our workers. If they go down, we see an increase in supply, but if they go up, we're going to see a decrease in supply. Or it might be the cost of the raw materials used in the production process. We might also see cost per unit change because of cost-saving technologies. And cost-saving technologies here are very specific. A cost-saving technology takes an existing product and it somehow reduces the cost to put it together. There are a lot of other types of technological changes that we're not talking about here. So we're not talking about technological changes that enhance the quality of the product. That's changing multiple things at once. And we're not talking about technological changes that actually create new markets. So I'm in my 40s. Over my lifetime, I've bought music in a variety of different types of media. So I used to buy music on vinyl records, or LPs. I used to buy music on 8-track tapes, on cassette tapes, on CDs. I have downloaded files probably illegally through things like Napster, but I don't do that anymore now that I've found the error of my ways. And I've downloaded files more legally over the internet using things like iTunes. So here, each type of technological change actually creates a new market and slowly destroys the old type of media, perhaps. Those are different than what we're talking about when we simply say we have cost-saving technology. So with the cost-saving technology, something's changed that's going to reduce our cost per unit. The result is we have an increase in supply, a higher quantity supplied at each price because of those higher profits per unit, or a rightward shift in supply curve. Taxes and subsidies can also cause our supply curve to shift. So if we have a subsidy on a product, then firms are essentially receiving a higher price between the subsidy and the price that consumers pay, and that causes an increase in supply. But if we tax a product, the taxes are going to erode the firm's profits. They see lower profits per unit, and so in response to that, we see a decrease in supply. Another shift factor that's a little more complicated is if we have changes in the opportunity cost to the producers, or what I like to call production substitutes. So essentially, we're talking about changes in the profitability of other goods that use essentially the same inputs as the good we're talking about. So as an example, suppose that corn prices were to increase. Farmers respond to higher corn prices by wanting to grow more corn. We see an increase in the quantity supplied of corn moving along the supply curve. But in order to grow more corn, farmers devote more of their land perhaps to growing corn, which means less land is being devoted to other crops like soybeans. So even if the price of soybean hasn't changed, the higher profits coming from corn cause us to grow fewer soybeans, and we see a decrease in supply of soybeans, a lower quantity supplied at each price because we're shifting our resource use away from soybeans and toward growing more corn. Entry and exit of producers also causes shifts in supply. So if we have entry of new firms, we're adding up our market quantity supplied over a greater number of firms. We're going to see an increase in supply or a shift to the right of the supply curve. If we have firms leaving or exiting the industry, that's going to cause a decrease in supply, a low overall market quantity supplied at each price because there's fewer firms out there. Changes in expectations can also shift supply. So if sellers expect that prices are going to be higher sometime in the future, they might start taking some of their stock and putting it into inventory, taking it off of the floor, not offering it for sale right now so that they can sell more when the prices actually go up, or at least try to sell more when the prices go up. So the higher expected future price might cause today's supply curve to decrease or move to the left. Similarly, if they expect the price of their product is going to have to drop in the future, they might start trying to sell as much as they can and pull everything out of inventory, which causes an increase in supply right now. So to summarize, our common shift factors for supply are a change in the price of inputs, cost-saving technologies, changes in taxes or subsidies, changes in opportunity costs, or these production substitutes, entry or exit of producers, and changes in seller expectations. So as we move forward and we start to think about putting supply and demand together in Chapter 4, one thing to point out, when we look at the list of shift factors that we had on the demand side versus the list of shift factors on the supply side, the only one that they have in common are these expectations. Expectations about future prices will change the behavior of both buyers and sellers. But none of the rest of these that we see here show up as shift factors of demand. None of these shift factors of demand, aside from changes in buyer expectations, show up as shift factors of supply. So that's going to be important, because if we look at any change in these shift factors besides expectations, that means it's only going to shift one curve or the other, but not both. Changes in expectations are the only thing that can change both curves at the same time.